Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Saturday edition of the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and I'm thrilled you're here with us tonight. And as it's Saturday night, as always, I will welcome back my good friend and co-host, Mr. Don Longbeard, to the show.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Oh, look at that. Oh, hey.
I will unmute my co-host, Don
that,
Longbeard.
That darn mute button.
And welcome him to the show.
Hi, how are everybody? Everybody.
Well, you know, it's a great night, one that I'm really excited about due to the presence of our special guest tonight, and it's a Paranormal Portal first for our guest tonight to be on, and you know, he and I haven't had the opportunity to talk to Brooks too much, and our special guest tonight is Mr. Brooks Agnew, and but I've been absolutely fascinated with this gentleman for a long time. He is an electrical engineer. He's a chemist. He's a inventor. He's an entrepreneur. He's an author. He's a businessman. He is so many things, but he's also passionate about the paranormal. So what's not to love, ladies and gentlemen? But I would just like to take this moment to give a really special welcome to you, Mr. Brooks Agnew. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We'll find out if it is at the end of 2 hours, but it's going to be fun. I know this.
Oh, it's fantastic, and I'm really thrilled that you're here with us tonight. And I know that you lead an incredibly busy life, and I know how much it means for you to have to take your time and to do this. So it's a true honor, and I'm just pleased that you're here. And ladies and gentlemen, the call-in board is open tonight on the portal. It's the area code 213-233-3998. 213-233-3998 to call in. And if you're in the UK or over in that neck of the woods, you can call in dialing 44203-393-2871. 44203-393-2871. So we have the opportunity for you to get involved with the discussion as well, if you so choose. So, Brooks, how long have you been interested in the paranormal? Is this a lifelong thing for you, or did something happen that got you interested, or what is the story?
I guess the earliest memories I have about, going back with the paranormal have to be about age 9. And the reason I say that is that my grandmother was a gifted psychic. I mean, she really had a gift. And my mother, however, did not. And so, I caught them a lot of times playing with things like tarot cards and Ouija boards and things like that when I was a little kid. And one of the things that became very apparent at about age 9 is that the gift skipped my mother and went to me.
Oh.
So I began to notice, my earliest memory of, being able to, see things through time was I walked out on the front porch one day and my mother was smoking a cigarette sitting there on the front porch by the fern that was next to our front door. And I just said, I just have a feeling the power plant's going to blow up. Oh. Well, this is Long Beach. The power plant's about 5 or 6 miles away from the house. All of a sudden, the power plant explodes. The boiler blows off the side of the power plant. Steam goes billowing in the air 1,000 feet. And of course, my mother started crying. Partly, I think, because of the explosion and all the windows rattling and everything like that. But I think partly also because I saw it. So, and that always bothered her. It bothered her my whole life, or her whole life. She never really, I think, liked the fact that things came to me that way. I never really asked for it, but it would just come to me. And my grandmother sort of fostered that. She helped it along. She told me what to look for, told me what to feel when, things are about to happen. She called it getting loose in time. She used to call it a juxtaposition. And I carried that term forward with me throughout my life. It was like you travel along on these little spider web thin, threads of time through space. And then occasionally you get to a place where there's like a knot where a whole bunch of threads come together and go out in different directions. They're all tied up together. That's a juxtaposition. Things that you do or things that you see at that moment change the direction of your timeline.
Wow.
And so I learned at a very young age, A, how to see down those things, and B, how to change the direction of my life. And that's why when you look at my resume, you go, holy cow, how many people is this? It's because I've been able to step on those things and say, well, I've learned everything I need to know down this thread. Now I'm going to go down this one, and I can just change. And it's like I was traveling down that thread all along. And it's been an advantage to me in life because I've known where to stand when, the ball comes over the wall, so to speak. I can catch it. I've known what trends are going to happen in the market. But the biggest advantage, and I don't know how to put this any other way, but I can see how machines work. I can, even if they're not running. I mean, even if you just bring me a machine in a box with no instructions, I can put the machine together and make it work. I've always been able to do that since I was really, really young, since I got my first science kit at age 10.
That is amazing. Now, that's an interesting point. But it's also, your life would almost seem like a dichotomy then as well, because you have such a firm foothold in the sciences, and and not only are you well versed in them, but you're proficient in them, but also you have this firm foothold in the spirituality. So how do you balance those things in your life, or how did you?
I learned very early on, and I believe this with every fiber of my being, that science and spirituality are one. They always were. It was actually the church that separated the two. They were the ones that said, well, scientists, are sort of like high priests, or sort of like prophets or seers. And early, I guess, in the medieval times, the two competed against one another. And so the church basically threatened science with separation. Right. And then later, government and politics became the mechanism, the mechanics of religion. Politics is just the mechanics of religion. But originally, science and spirituality were one. The connection through the chemical, through the atomic, through energy was always spiritual.
That's amazing, and that's very incredibly profound. And that's what I have always thought, that, and I think many people are coming to this conclusion as we grow in our knowledge and in our ability to understand the mechanical workings of the natural world around us, is that the more that we learn, the more we're going to validate the spirit, and the more we're going to validate the spiritual as key components to the workings of this all.
And that's why, deep spiritual concepts are never really surprising to a scientist. I've often said, all chemists are poets, because we have to learn a new language. We have to learn how to balance equations and energies and deal with really etheric particles like protons and neutrons and electrons. And it's the same way with language. We put language together the same way. We put it together in patterns and nodes and alliterations and parallelisms in order to deliver our thoughts so that they're profound enough or unique enough where people can remember them. But it's the same thing. And I say the same thing about physicists. I remember the first time I visited the gravitational wave observatory up in Hanford, Washington. I made a bucket list.
Yeah.
I wanted to visit both of the gravitational wave observatories, which I'm sure is on everyone's bucket list. But I went up to I was working not far from Hanford, Washington, on a contract for the state of Washington, and I made a point to drive over there with my partner, and we thought, oh, it's going to have a fence around it. It'll have guards. No, no, no. It was a public facility, paid for by government money. Sure, come on in, we'll give you a tour. So the interesting thing is we see a great demonstration on Thomas Young's slit experiment,
Mm.
the slit experiment. We tour the sapphire mirror where they split the laser beam, and we see the tunnels that they evacuate all the air out of and shoot the laser down to measure the curvature of space and all of that.
Wow.
And after all that is done, Dr. Fred Robb, his name is spelled R-A-A-B, but it's pronounced Robb. We're just talking, just the three of us, just standing around talking, and he says, "Yeah, we see these particles blinking into our dimension from another dimension."
Right.
What? What did you just say? He said, "Yeah, we see all the time because this instrument's so sensitive. We see particles blinking into this dimension from another dimension."
Wow.
And I thought, this is a world class, probably one of the top four physicists in the country running this facility. And he just told me about multiple dimensions. So I'm convinced that science and spirituality are not a dichotomy. They're at maybe worst parallel streams, but I think that they're concentric circles of consciousness. I was having a discussion with Sir Roger Penrose. I know you know who he is. He's an icon, or was an icon in the world of physics. And he made a statement one day. It was years and years and years ago. He said that consciousness was the result of quantum gravity. And I thought about that for a while, and I wrote him back. And I said, no, I think it's the other way around. I think quantum gravity is the result of consciousness.
Oh.
How profound that was, because we've always known, or at least postulated, that there are four forces in the universe. There's the strong and weak molecular forces, and then there's gravity, and then there's electromagnetism, and that's it. But recently, and I mean like really recently, like the last half dozen years, physicists have resolved that there's a fifth force in the universe, and that fifth force is consciousness. And more, they're starting to agree that it is the primary force in the universe.
Wow. That is incredible. I'm just nearly speechless. That's
I don't have anything to say.
that's just one of those revelations that it totally does so much to prove what's going on in the terms of
Question
spirituality. I'm sorry, go
calls
ahead.
it everything we know. It
Yeah.
doesn't. I mean, that's one of the things we love about these thought experiments as physicists is we hate really knowing the answers to the questions. What we really want to know is what is the right question.
Mm, wow. Because if consciousness is the driving, then that totally empowers everybody. It totally empowers everybody as a universal force. That is so profound.
Well, it also takes away all the excuses because if we're the co-creators or some massive cooperative creator, or somehow when we're not in a body we're more conscious than when we are in a body, unless we become incredibly enlightened, then that means that we're 100% responsible for our life condition, and that's just too much for people to handle. Sometimes we
Mm.
want something or someone to blame our life condition on.
Yeah, and that's a lot of cultural conditioning and a lot of conditioning over generations and aeons of subjugation and putting people into castes and separations, and by design, maybe. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, it may be that we actually are, because I think wherever there are two intelligences in the universe, one is always greater than the other.
Mm.
And I, in my many, many decades on this planet, have become convinced that there are young souls on this world, and there are a few old ones.
Hmm. I would agree with that completely. And so, do you think that speaks to the evolution of the soul, in that, well, some are here as teachers, some are here as students, or is, because at that point, is time linear? I don't know I mean, I could go so deep with this because it's just like right there, and I have never had this opportunity to talk with you on this level. But is there a non-Euclidean space time where every moment is happening at the same moment, and it's our awareness moving through it, or is time linear and we experience it in a chain?
Well, I mean, the best way to answer that's mathematically, and not in the sense that I want to prove anything, but
Sure, sure.
the thing that we like about math is it shows us relationships. So when we think about functions, um, we think about relationships between force and acceleration, or between charge and photon frequencies. And one of the most elegant equations that we have, that pretty much everybody knows, is E is equal to mc squared, right?
Right.
Energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared. But this, and if we expand out that formula, it's really mass is equal to uh, or energy is equal to mass times the velocity of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. It's a fraction, right? And then that's squared, so it's per second per second. And it's important to understand that, because then when we start going faster, or we start pouring more energy into that equation, we we look at the speed of light, or the distance of light, 186,000 miles. That's fixed. That's a constant in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
The other three variables, the second, mass, and energy, are all variable. They all change as more and more energy goes into it. That is, as faster and faster and faster you go, the smaller and smaller time becomes,
Mm.
which means also that mass becomes or approaches infinity. In reality, what happens is distance in space becomes zero. Okay, time is distance, because we measure time in space in terms of distance. So if that were the case, if you were a photon and you were sent out from the star Arcturus and you're headed for Earth, if you're standing on Earth, you could marvel at the idea that, gosh, it takes 8.5 years for that photon to get to my eye so that I can see Arcturus from here.
Mm-hmm.
But the photon, there is no path. Earth is right here. There's no path. Why? Because there's no time. There's no distance between Arcturus and here at the speed of light. So, from the photon's perspective, this entire universe is still the singularity that it always was. It never changed. It's only our consciousness, our observation, that slowed space down so that we see all the stars and all the galaxies and all the space in between.
Wow. My bacon is officially fried.
Don't need to batter that bacon, then. Uh, the thing is that there is no being on Earth that can even contemplate what I just said,
No
except for
kidding.
humans.
Goodness.
We're the ones that have the ability to contemplate time. No dog, no horse, no fish, no bird, not even whales or dolphins have a concept of an hour, let alone the future or the past for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
So um, the fact that we can behold time, that we can contemplate time, that we can, and this is a really important word, we'll probably crack this open tonight. The fact that we can observe time means that we change it. We're the only beings that do that. It's why we were created the way we are.
That's phenomenal. Wow. It's been such an amazing start. It's like we started the show and just went to warp speed. It's like, wow.
That's not warp speed. That's ludicrous speed.
What was that, Brooks?
We start at warp speed and go on from there.
There you go.
Yes, we have, and it's a great start. I mean, we've only got just about 5 minutes until the first break, so I mean, we're already screwing up space time here, Brooks.
Well, that's my intention.
Well, that's really interesting, and yeah, we will get into that, ladies and gentlemen, tonight. We'll be talking about time anomalies. We'll be talking about time travel, and we'll also get into the Hollow Earth theory.
Wow, that was really powerful.
It was a great segue.
Well, we have 6 minutes to go before the break, or 4 minutes to go before the break?
Yeah, about 4 minutes. Yep.
The paranormal, how this all fits back to where we started this half-hour segment. Becoming aware that things you think about do happen. Like, I think it happens with everybody. You know, when in the old days when we didn't have cell phones, we had a phone that hung on the wall, and it had, no caller ID or anything. Sometimes the phone would ring, and you would know who it was on the phone. Everybody does that. I'm sure everyone's done it at some time or another. Mm-hmm. The phone rings. It's just a plain old everyday innocuous ring. And you just pick up and go, "Oh, hi, Grandma. How did you know it was me?" Well, I just did. It doesn't happen all the time. Well, I mean, just to some people. But the point is that on some level you were aware that a thought was coming your way, that someone had intentionally dialed your number with the intention of speaking to you. And that intention, through consciousness, the fastest thing in the universe, thought, reached your open mind before that phone call did. And you knew it was her. And that happens all the time in real life, all the time. We just aren't listening.
Right. Wow. And that's really key too. And I think that's part of opening awareness. And because we're living our lives in a very confined tunnel of vision, but it's self-imposed. And as we learn to expand our mind and our gifts, then those new realities come swamping in.
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question. What does it feel like when you walk into the presence, or one with this presence walks into your presence that has broken those bounds, that is expanded? What does it feel like?
Yeah, I think we're feeling it right now, actually.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Feels like this, dude. Feels just like this. No, I mean, sometimes you can step into an elevator with someone you don't even know. I mean, you're not even from that town, but you can instantly feel, you know what, I need to strike up a conversation with this person. This is a very expanded person.
Mm-hmm. No, I can tell you that on the rare occasions that I've met people that are incredibly profound spiritually or energetically, I end up feeling dizzy. I get this washing, dizzy, overwhelming, faint feeling almost.
Ah, interesting. Like you become disconnected. You become off balance a little bit. That's very interesting.
Yep, exactly. Very much so.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I find that some people do put off or emit an energy, mm-hmm. and some, strangely enough, I mean, I've passed by people on the sidewalk or in the mall or at a business in an office building, and I really hate to say this because it sounds so ostentatious, but there's nothing there. totally empty. Night, there's a body that just went by me, but there is no one there.
Yeah. And so that would be kind of like akin to what Christian Cherie say about the NPCs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've had conversations about that before, but it is such a strange feeling. Like, they're barely conscious.
Mm-hmm.
They're blinking and breathing, and I'm sure their heart's pumping, but not much else going on up there.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. So,
A
ladies and
very
gentlemen,
enjoyable person.
yeah, and there seems to be that whole level of variation in between as well. But tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by our special guest, Brooks Agnew, who, as you can tell, is going to expand the portal with his very presence. And we're going to go to our first break of the night, ladies and gentlemen, so don't go away. We'll be back with more of this night on the Paranormal Portal. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Paranormal Portal. I'm still your host, Brent Thomas, and we are just burning the night away. And we have started on an absolute rocket ship. We've gone to warp speed, ladies and gentlemen, and the portal is whirring with all she's worth to keep up with it. This is such an energy flow here tonight. But what are you thinking so far, Don?
I have to be honest. I find everything Brooke's saying just phenomenally interesting. The problem is I'm not on his level quite there yet. But I mean, these are things that I have to look into and expand my consciousness with. Being the not necessarily, I'm gonna not say skeptic. I'm not gonna say being a skeptic. I'm gonna say being an unbeliever. I've recently changed my stance on that. Being an unbeliever, make me believe it, And when Brooks opened his mouth, I knew I was in trouble. I just knew it.
Well, welcome back to the show, Mr. Brooks. Thanks for being here.
Being a scientist is you don't believe in anything.
Yeah.
To have proof, and it's kind of a moment by moment challenge, because in mathematics we have proofs because we can derive things from known things, but in science what we're really trying to do is look for the right questions. And we know that if we ask the wrong questions, we're going to go in the wrong direction. And we have all kinds of ways of dealing with that. Even in mathematics, we have a system we call the standard model when we're trying to understand physics, and you can almost get any answer you want out of it. But the two answers we don't like infinity, and we don't like zero. So when we're looking for an answer, we often put what we call correction factors. You might call them fudge factors, but in mathematics, one of the rules that we know is whatever we do to one side of the equation, if we do exactly the same thing to the other side of the equation, it doesn't really change the value. So what we do is we put conversion factors. That's one of the secrets of life, by the way, clean glassware and conversion factors. You can write that down. You can put conversion factors on either side of the equation and cancel out the things that give you infinity and give you zero. And then what's left is really meaningful, at least leads you in the right direction. And when I say direction, I mean it's like a ray or an increase in value. Like, oh, I'm going uphill, or I'm going downhill, or I'm going forward, I'm going backward. And when it comes to that, we get comfort when we can do that, because it sort of gives us what we call the ability to extrapolate. Like, we can take a ruler and we can extrapolate it to a mile. Mm-hmm. It's going to be off quite a bit because of the scale of extrapolation. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing when we look out into space. We don't really have any perspective. What? A dozen lifetimes, maybe, which is nothing. That's a millisecond in the life of a star. We know that our solar system is traveling through space around the galaxy, and we know the galaxy is moving through space, but it would take 1 million lifetimes to get the kind of perspective that we need in order to make really predictions about what's going on in the universe. We don't have that. All we have is our ability to extrapolate from the known, which I have to admit is painfully small, to the unknown, which is enormous. So what we're really looking for is the right direction. And the one item of measurement that most of the paranormal people talk about, most spiritualists, most yogis, is they talk about this increment of time called now. And for a physicist, because we don't believe in much, we don't really believe in it now. And the reason we don't is because we cannot measure it. We don't know how fast it's going, and we can't locate it in space. There's no formula for now. So now to us does not exist. What does exist is a kind of a Schrodinger, you know what Schrodinger's cat is?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Okay. It's a thought experiment Schrodinger thought of, where box, and inside the box there's a cat, and the cat is neither alive nor dead. It's only alive or dead if you actually open the box and discover the state of the cat. It's important to have both states because in physics we have this crazy duality called wave particle duality. Energy likes to act like a wave mathematically, but anytime we observe it, anytime we stop it and say, oh, what's your spin, what's your velocity, what's your location, it becomes a particle. And we really like it to stay a wave. So we really don't want to identify now. What we want to do is consider the wave. We want to consider the force, the speed, the propagation, the angle, the phase of that wave. That's all the things that we can really understand in the universe. And the same thing works with consciousness. The same thing works with the paranormal. As long as we consider the whole thing and we just consider the frequency that it's operating at and not the particle of it, which is the now, we can understand it.
Oh, that's
Profound.
Poetic as hell. That's just amazingly astute. You're reshaping a lot of things in a quick hurry here, which is wonderful. I have to tell you that, of course I've been aware of your accomplishments for a long time, being on TFR as a fellow host and sharing a network with you. But it wasn't until I heard you on Beyond the Veil that I heard this deep and profound spiritual side, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And maybe it's my own personal bias, or maybe it's my own personal experience that I hadn't met someone like you before that was so adept and knowledgeable in the sciences and so accomplished in the sciences, and yet had such a profound and amazing spiritual awareness and actualization. So for me, that was absolutely incredible to come to that realization. And I was like, my God, I got to get this guy on the show. And it's been a long time, but I finally made the contact with you and we dialed it in. But, you're an incredibly complex person.
That's a really left-handed way of saying I have no friends, but you're probably right. I, it's tempting sometimes, especially when I'm with wisdom of age, to keep one's mouth shut when it comes to speaking about stuff like this all the time. When I was young, I had no such bridle. Let me tell you. Anybody that would fog a mirror long enough would hear something like this or something along this way. I mean, I started writing journals. Let's see. I want to say I was 15 years old. I started writing journals because in those days we had typewriters. We didn't really have a way of transcribing anything electronically. So I just started with a pen and a writing pad. And after I got a stack of those, they began to morph into. This is really going to sound strange. They began to morph into kind of prayers. Like, I'm not writing for my posterity. I'm writing to someone or something, some consciousness out there. And what it began to do is slow my brain down to the speed of my hand, and it sort of helped me focus. I have ADD, really bad ADHDs actually. You know what that is?
Yeah, well, I know ADHD, but I don't know what S means.
Well, it's attention deficit hyperactive. Oh, shiny.
Hey, you want to go ride bikes?
Yeah. So it would help me focus my mind, and so I actually started keeping journals, and I've been doing it my whole life. And it's someday someone will crack these open and say, "Wow, there's a psychosis to deal with." But it helped me not have to open my mouth and speak to people about these kinds of things. I just have a normal human relationship, and then my other alien relationship would be in between the sheets of the paper.
Oh.
But it didn't prevent the abnormal childhood as if I had one. Because my brother was 9 years older than me, so he was already in college by the time I was, not even in high school yet, just fourth or fifth grade. So I often went to school with him at the college. And I didn't sit there like a bump on a log. I learned. So by the time I got through high school, I was already a sophomore in college. Because I took classes at night. I went to the university and took classes, and I held my own. And I never took the SAT, never had to. I was a transfer student as soon as I graduated.
Wow.
And that's why you go and look at my transcript and you go, how many students is this? And it appears as though there is no focus there because, the resume is pretty long. But there is a focus there because, it all fits to me. It is all transitory. Mathematics.
Did we lose him? I don't know what happened there. No, he's still showing us connected. Uh-oh, ladies and gentlemen, not sure what happened there. We might have lost Mr. Brooks Agnew. Let me pull this up and see what's going on. No, he's still showing up. It might.
Hey Brooks, if you can still hear us, can you let me know in TFR chat?
No, he did drop. Let me
he's
let
dropped.
me get him. Let me get him back, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's put this on pause. Let's put a pin in it. We'll revisit it in just a moment.
We'll unpack this in a few minutes. I gotta find him in the list of names. Why isn't it alphabetical? That's a pain. Hold on. Ay, ay, ay. You would think it would be, wouldn't you? Strange that. Let me just see if I type it in up here, if it'll come up. Nobody. Brooks Agnew. Brooks A. Agnew. That shows a B, though. I don't know who that is. My God, how did I lose that? All right, just a sec here. I don't know how we lost that, ladies and gentlemen, but
Wow.
he's here. He was here. Very strange. But he's on my list here, but I can't seem to call it up. I don't know. Well, I mean, I can see it. This new Skype really has me all kinds of confused, but... there he is.
I'm not exactly sure what happened.
Wow, interesting.
Very glad you're back.
I don't even know where we stopped.
We were talking about you transferring into college, and then suddenly you were gone, so...
Well, I'm back.
Well, welcome back.
I never took the SAT. I just was a transfer student right out of high school.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I know the resume looks long and convoluted, which kind of makes me unemployable. But to me, as I was saying to the empty space because I had lost the call, it all fits together to me. I mean, when I look back, it's a pretty straight line. When everyone else looks at it, it looks like a big ink splotch. But mathematics becomes music. Architecture becomes, space research. Mathematics becomes a texture, a color, a shape, and I don't really know how to explain it, but to me, if I have a missing piece, some transitory piece that's missing in my overall picture, then I go pick up the book or go to the internet and learn it and put it in there, and then everything fits together.
Right. And so it was since we ended up really establishing time and space and how the consciousness works within those parameters, I would like to get your take on, now we've done a few shows just relaying people's encounters with things like time slips and time anomalies. And it would seem, and I've experienced what I believe is a few time anomalies myself, or time slips, but what do you think is happening there where people are like one place and suddenly they're somewhere else and they can't account for what happened in between?
Most people experience this when they're driving. They'll be driving along and the car is staying in between the lines. Nobody's seeing any erratic behavior. All of a sudden you look up and you go, oh, wow, I'm in exit 47?
Right.
How
Yeah.
did I get here? Or worse, you arrive home, pull into the driveway and go, how did I get here?
Sure.
I don't remember any of the turns or anything. I mean, did I make any mistakes? Did I cut anybody off? You really don't know because part of you is in this timeline and part of you is in another timeline. And it does it worse for me when I'm talking on the phone, hands free on the freeway. Oh, I've passed up my exit so many times. I can't tell you how many times. Uh, Time is something that this world teaches us. We used to wear wristwatches. Now we pack around a cell phone. Nobody pretty much wears watches anymore unless it's a piece of jewelry.
Right.
We are not really creatures of time. The shortest increment of time that a human soul can actually comprehend, I call it a moment. And sometimes 5 minutes is the longest amount of time when you're waiting for a class to end or for quitting time to come or lunch or something. 5 minutes is like, oh my gosh, will it hurry up? And other times, time goes by so fast, and not because we're busy, but just because we're not connected to it for some reason. And two people in the same place at the same time, actually touching one another, even dancing with one another, have two completely different concepts of that exact moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's not so much the moment, it's not so much the increment of time that's important, it's our observation of that moment that's important. Because that's what our memories are divided up into, our moments.
So, do you feel that this is an actual phenomenon, or do you just think it has to do with perception and consciousness?
No, I think it's an actual phenomenon, and I actually think that there are multiple timelines that are moving sometimes parallel to one another, sometimes skewed to one another, and sometimes in opposite directions from one another. And we can actually become aware, not just for a microsecond or two, but for prolonged periods of time of these other timelines.
Mm-hmm.
And we can actually bring back memories from those timelines to this timeline. And here's the most profound thing. We can take thoughts and imaginations, dreams, hopes, manifestations from this timeline, and we can go put them on other timelines.
Wow.
We were having, this is going to get physics again. We were having an experiment. Dr. Kip Thorne and Stephen Hawking and myself. And I'm trying to remember the other guy's name.
Talk about
His
6
name
degrees.
escapes me. But we were talking about photons that get close to the edge of a black hole. And the consensus was that if a photon gets close to a black hole, close to the event horizon, that it will clone itself. And that the clone or the original will fall into the black hole and the other photon will be ejected. And so the idea was, and this is Stephen's idea, is that our universe is leaking into another universe.
Ah.
And although I agreed with that, I said if that is true, then that means that other universes are leaking into our universe.
Sure, because there has to be balance.
Well, maybe not, but I don't know if it's exactly balanced. No one could say the equation is balanced. It probably ebbs and flows with a net result in both directions. But here's the important part. One of the things that we assume about all photons is that they have a frequency. Every photon is emitted by the distance between two particles. So if an electron falls from one electron shell on an atom or a molecule to another electron shell, it emits a photon of a specific frequency that has to do with that distance between that electron traveled. That's how spectroscopy works in space.
Hmm.
That's how we know what oxygen looks like, and titanium and aluminum is because of that frequency. We know that. We have catalogs of those frequencies.
Wow.
But one thing we know about that photon is it carries information. It carries all kinds of information, like is that particle traveling toward us or away from us? Is it spinning clockwise or counterclockwise? There's all kinds of information that goes with that photon. So if there's information leaking out of our universe, there's information leaking into our universe. And that information is poured over the whole universe. And conscious beings become aware of that information. So when a wave of this energy passes over Earth, all of a sudden there's a huge output of inventions, and they're all very similar
Oh.
because all that information is poured over everybody at the same time, and everybody has a different skill set in their mind and their soul that they're working with, and so they create different things from it. Some create musical compositions, some create art, some create electrical devices. I was in Tibet, and I was under the Patala, which is up till about 120 years ago was the tallest building in the world. It's difficult to get under the Patala. I'll tell you that story sometime. But underneath this huge building, in the basement, is this tall gold structure that they call a stupa. And when we got down there, I asked my Tibetan guide, what the heck is that thing? He said, it's a stupa. It's designed to transport the soul of a Panchen Lama through a four-dimensional stargate to another place in the universe. And it's all there symbolically. Gold, sapphires, diamonds. I mean, it's unbelievable structure. The only thing is it looked exactly like a Tesla coil, and I recognized it. So I took a picture of it. We didn't get arrested. We almost did, but we didn't get arrested. Made it back to the United States. I took that picture and I overlaid the Tesla coil, and all the coils were there, the reflector dish on top. It even had stylized lightning coming down at the angles using ribbons and gold foil. You see, that was built in the 7th century. But Tesla didn't invent his coil until 1900. They both saw exactly the same thing. But the Tibetans built it out of gold and said that it transports the soul of a Panchen Lama to through a four-dimensional stargate. Tesla built it with wires and energized it and made the lightning.
Wow. That is so profound. It would seem that the ancients had so much knowledge when you look at sites like Pumapunku and so many other sites, the pyramids, all these ancient amazing feats that would be hard to duplicate even with our best technology today. And somehow they managed it. And I guess we'll probably be able to get into this more on the other side as we're just about coming up to the hour break in about a minute and a half. But it would seem the world has seen many incarnations of great societies. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely would. And believe me, there's a ton to talk about for you. This is going to be cool.
Yeah, that because and it seems like for some reason, and this is my theory, I have no way to back it up, just a gut feeling, but it seems that there's been many rise and falls of great civilizations, and I'm talking pre-Egypt, pre-Aztec, all of those, and back into what would be the prehistory, into some long distant past, and then something happens where it gets wiped out and rebooted, and then it climbs again, and it happens and wipes out and reboots again. But I don't know. There's something profound that's happened that we don't even have the beginning of understanding.
Well, you use an interesting word, reboot. When you have a computer freeze up, you're working on a file, and you have to reboot that computer. What are you really hoping to do when you reboot the computer?
Get a fresh start, clear the memory, and get rid of any conflicts and get it going.
Well, I'm going to add something to that.
Sure.
What you're really trying to do is recover the file.
Well, yeah, you got a point.
Very true.
Occam's razor.
So, if an ancient civilization that barely had enough manpower to feed its own people spent a huge amount of their gross domestic product, which is labor, to build something like that, that
We're going to have to get into this on the other side of the break, Brooks. We're just up to the wall here. But, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back with more of this incredible journey of thought, idea, and science here on the portal. So don't go away, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Hi everyone, it's Chris Gio here, founder of Truth Freak.
Play their games. Everybody loves to place their bets. They don't understand the price I paid. They don't care to comprehend. Trace their lines upon my body, dripping scars across my heart. Raging anger pours inside me as their lies keep falling apart. With my silence, I am not a stupid boy. No more breaking me with kindness, just you dance upon my joy. Feeding me with empty promise, you're just another fucking mess. Taking off the slice of my sanity, just make sure that you're well fed.
This looks extraordinarily bad.
They linger in a perpetual dream state, a nightmare from which they cannot wake. I can't see you, Mommy. Where are you? I've never sensed anything like it. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that.
Poltergeists are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
Poltergeist disturbances are fairly short duration, perhaps a couple of months. Hauntings can go on for years.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are entering hour number 2 here in the portal, and it's sailing as smooth. The discussion is absolutely overwhelming, but awesome. And of course, I'm joined by Don Longbeard on our Saturday night escapade into the portal. Welcome back, Don.
Definitely an escapade.
Welcome back, sir. And welcome again to our special guest tonight, Mr. Brooks Agnew, fellow TFR host, electrical engineer, chemist, author, best-selling author on Amazon, and entrepreneur, inventor. The guy is just one of those people that are, I don't know, that are just have this overwhelming pedigree, but obviously one of the most down-to-earth, kind, nice people I've ever talked to as well. So thanks for being here, Brooks. You're absolutely cooking all our bacon, but we're enjoying it.
Well, that's okay. I enjoy it. I enjoy putting the energy out. Normally, when we have deep discussions like this, there should be a campfire and a cigar, but we're in a hotel room. We can't do that.
Well, I think it's just amazing. And I was going to say something, and now it completely blew my mind. But my mind's kind of blown tonight anyway, because I'll tell you, it's, a lot of the things you're talking about, I had at least, a passing familiarity, or I might have heard a reference of, but the way that you're breaking it down, the way that you're bringing it to life, and re-explaining it is just so profound to me, and it's really driving a lot of things home that I had never quite grasped. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for taking the time to be here, because this is definitely one of the most profound shows I've ever done.
Wow, I appreciate that very much.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Now, before break, we just managed to start talking about the idea that there were far, far more ancient civilizations that existed and were wiped out as, and one of the indicators to this, for me, are things like artifacts out of time, where people are finding screws embedded into rocks that are, 300 million years old, or the London hammer, which was found in London, Texas. And, the wooden handle was so old, it was either petrified or turning into coal. And the hammerhead itself was embedded into, 300 million year old rock as well. Do you think that those are actual breadcrumbs of the existence of these previous civilizations?
I do, in fact, and I one of the things that we find in conflict in science, we have a lot of ologies, In science, we have archaeology and we have geology. Geology moves very slowly. We have two philosophies about it. One is humanism, and the other is catastrophism. Humanism believes that the forces that are at work on the earth today have always been at work on the earth. And so we can take a period of time like, I don't know, carbon decay or the etching of a valley by a river, and we can work backwards and we can then tell how long that's been there. Sort of like if you have a kitchen sink and you put a graduated cylinder underneath the sink and the sink is dripping, and you count the number of drops and then you count the volume in the graduated cylinder, and you can say, oh, I know how many minutes that thing has been sitting underneath the sink. That's humanism. Catastrophism, very simply, is someone came in the kitchen, turned the faucet on, shut it off, left it dripping, and left, and then you walked in. And it's only actually been there for maybe 1 minute, not 4 hours. Catastrophism states that some event, some cataclysmic event occurred, which changed the energy set and the time at which that energy entered that set. And thus, you are not able to extrapolate backwards and tell how long something has been there. So archaeologists have a tendency to go off what they know. Like, okay, we know this was the Bronze Age, and we know that this civilization, was 20,000 years ago. And so that's how they make their judgments. Geology says, yeah, that may very well be. But that skeleton is actually resting in a sediment bed that has been there for 200,000 years, undisturbed. So we know that skull, that guy drowned in this creek, and the silt from that creek covered this body up 200,000 years ago, because this silt is undisturbed. And that's where the two sciences kind of battle it out. So we have the archaeologists who show up in Egypt, and they see, oh, look at these 3 great pyramids in Giza. And the red granite came from Aswan, 300 miles to the north, or to the south, and the black granite came from the Sudan, 1,000 miles to the south. But nobody takes into consideration that when Egyptus walked into the valley of Egypt, or into the Nile River Valley, there was no standard measurement system. There was no universal language. You couldn't send an order for black granite to Sudan and have it arrive the right size and dimensions. It didn't exist. There was no cubit, there was no inch, there was no millimeter, there was nothing. What we realize, if you go there enough times and you spend enough time with people who study this all the time, like Robert Balval or L.A. Marzulli or somebody like that, you realize these things were there a long time before Egyptus walked into that valley. And they saw those pyramids and they went, wow, that's really cool. Let's build something like that. And you go look at every single other pyramid in all of Egypt, everywhere. And they're all cheap copies. They all have cracks. They're not the right angles. They don't have the right secrets to them. They're not aligned the same way. They missed the point totally. And you realize at Pumapunku that you have these laser sharp marks and grooves and things that were cut in granite. And yeah, maybe we could say, okay, they used diamond dust and they used a forged copper blade. And yeah, well, listen, they only had about 400 years to build this, and it'd take about 2,000 years at that rate to build that, and it just can't be done.
Yeah.
Not to mention that the stones that they built it from came from about 20 miles away and 12,000 feet different in altitude.
Right.
And there's no human possible way to lift a stone like that 12,000 feet. It's not possible. But they don't take that into consideration. What I realized after traveling the world and seeing all of these things, 44 different civilizations, 7 different continents around the world, is I realized that these things were made at great expense to these societies. They could have done other things with their labor. They could have rerouted rivers. They could have, fed their people. They could have had shelter. They could have defended themselves against their enemies. But that's not what they did. What they did is they built these structures, not for them, for us. They built it for our day. They built it for 2012. They built it for a certain star alignment that would occur in November of 2012. But this was like the 5th century. Why would they do that? We don't do things for our own grandkids, let alone 500 years from now.
Yeah, that's true. Wow.
what became painfully aware to me, I came to me as an epiphany. Okay, there was wine involved, but it came to me as an epiphany that the reason these things were done is because these people knew that at this time there would be forces at work on Earth that could destroy the whole planet or take it to the next generation of consciousness, the next evolution. And what we really, really would need is we'd need some kind of reminder about who we were, what is the purpose of life, where we came from, who we are. And there was a strong belief every single one of these civilizations had that it was going to be them. They were going to be the ones that would get these clues in the future. They were the ones that would have to be reminded who they were. We are them.
Wow. That's incredible. Wow. And so what do you I mean, now with I think it's Pumapunku, there's talk that they're trying to figure out what could have caused those collapses of those monuments and those huge blocks that, you know, that could have been maybe a hinges or whatever. There's machined to perfection. And I watched a show, and I believe it was Ancient Aliens, and they thought that perhaps it was some sort of cataclysmic flood. Do you think that there may have been some sort of cataclysmic flood that had occurred to do the damage?
Yeah. Yeah, we wrote 2,000 pages called The Arc of Millions of Years. It's a 4-volume set. And it is about this, what we call in our series of books, my co-author and I, we call it the union of the polarity. It is actually the combining of two planets, a planet that is mostly water and a planet that was mostly rock and steel or rock and iron. And we generally have an idea when this occurred, somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 years ago. 9,500 BC is the general consensus, but it may be plus or minus a little bit. So I'm going to say from maybe 8,000 to 12,000 years ago. This was a cataclysmic event as these two worlds, these two planets came together. And it flooded the one planet. I mean, just literally covered it with water. The water had to go somewhere, so it kind of went into interior cavities of the planet. It froze, and as the planet was in this cataclysmic collision, tilted 23 degrees on its axis. So the poles of this new alignment and obviously pushed further out away from the sun from the collision caused it to freeze, and in freezing, that it began to gather up on land masses and withdraw from other land masses around the planet. We also know irrefutably that the planet is somewhat larger than it was a long time ago. Several million years ago, the planet was smaller than it is right now. We know all the continents fit together, all the continental shelves fit together very tightly. The contours of all of them fit like a glove or puzzle pieces together, with the planet roughly about a third the size that it is right now. So when you take these cataclysmic events together, you see that the things that had to be built before this time had to be built to withstand that kind of cataclysm. And the only thing that could be shown to stand that kind of cataclysm is stone. And not all the stones stay together. You go around the world, you'll see stones thrown hither and yon that man cannot pick up. Something moved them out of the way. So not everything stayed together, but enough did stay together that it leaves a clue as to who we are. Now, there's also other forces in the universe that don't want us to remember who we are. They want us to think that we live one lifetime at a time, and you know, we get 100 years, and the idea is to fill your damn garage with all the toys you can, and that's the purpose of life. So get after it. That is not the purpose of life. That is so far from the purpose of life. It isn't. It is hilarious. Once you understand why you're here and what it is you're supposed to be doing, why you brought yourself here, and what an amazing, phenomenal time this is to be alive, it changes everything, believe me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that you're right. This is an amazing time, but it seems to be an amazing time. Just on this we seem to be on this cusp of a serious evolution of the consciousness collectively on a global scale. That there seems to be, I don't know if it's a frequency shift, a vibration, or what it is, but something is profoundly changing within all of us on this planet, and I believe that this time is going to be one of the most important time periods to ever have come. And it'll be the time period that we will tell our children or grandchildren, I was there when this happened. Like, it's going to be that huge, that important.
I think you're right. And one of the things that you become aware of, even in the ancient civilizations or looking at today's civilization, is that there are two sources of that frequency in the universe. One is very light and the other is very dark. The light one makes up the majority of the consciousness on the earth, I think. The dark one makes up a smaller portion, but its goal is to darken the entire thing. These two consciousnesses, these two influences, have very different ideas about the soul evolution of the beings on this world. I will say this, and I don't have any facts to back it up, but I have a feeling that there are more living consciousnesses, intelligences on this planet now than there ever have been at any one time. And so the conscious energy that is symbiotic with this planet, which is also conscious, is stronger than it has ever been in the life of this world. That is very, very profound.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing, and that's amazing. I don't know why, but it just feels right what you're saying. Like, it just resonates with me that what you're saying is absolutely dead on, and I hope so. I mean, I really hope so, because clearly we aren't the collect all the toys and see who wins people. I mean, that's not what we are. We're not this transparent fabrication of marketing and ownership. We are so much more on such a deep and profound level, and the fact that we're universal beings. We're not just these little blips on a map in some, in wherever we are. We resonate to the entirety of the universe, and so the more people that resonate with that and grow to that awareness, the more profound things will be.
Well, when you think about all the time, all the energy, all the planning, all the lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes that it took to accumulate this much awareness, and then to be awakened in this world where you can be and do anything that you could possibly imagine, which has not been the case for a lot of the existence of this planet. This is a very exciting time to be alive. It's also a very dangerous time to be alive, which is why we like it, I guess. We like the challenge. We are called to it. We're empowered to it. And there are other beings in the universe, very high level beings. We could call them angels. You can call them, gods with a little g or whatever you want. But they're not us. They can't do what we do. They will never be able to reach the potential that we can reach. We are of a very special lineage, and that is something that is coveted in the universe by other beings. It's always been that way. I mean, look at every single story you want to read in the Bible or the Popol Vuh or the Sefer Yetzirah or even the Quran. You'll see this battle between the firstborn and the youngest. It's the same battle over and over and over again. It's a type and a shadow, I call it. It is to teach us that we become part of this creation. We become part of this manifestation. And our level of understanding is so important. We can be tricked. We can be caught up in the solids of the temptation of this world. We can, go out there with factory-made signs, and we can protest for some stupid corporation that buys a bus ticket for us. And hopefully we see the folly in that and go, wow, boy, was I silly when I was 17. But we also can get locked into what I call a 401k life. You work and work and work and work and work, and you get all the hours in that you can, and you build that 401k up, and then you get sick and die, and you never get to enjoy what it is that you built up. We need to realize that every single day is heaven on this planet, and you can make it anything you want.
Absolutely. That's so incredibly powerful. That's I thought I had respect for you before, but I have just developed this.
Get out of here!
I swear to God, it's just like all of a sudden you're this entirely new person, and I was deeply in admiration of you before, but getting this opportunity to have a long dialogue discussion and the depth and the clarity that you work with is just really inspiring, and I really mean it. We do have a caller. Do you mind if I take a call? Is that okay with you, Brooks?
Yeah, let's take it.
All right. And this is Nacy. Nacy, I just want to say up front, we're about 4 minutes out of break, so if we hit break, just hang on and we'll come back to you after then.
Beautiful. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for keeping me up late again, as per usual.
Our pleasure.
This is the Brooks that I so thoroughly enjoy, and sorry to cut you off there, Don.
Go ahead.
Hey, that's
but
I enjoy him too. I fail to see why you don't enjoy me all the time.
Well, I unfortunately fail to see also, but if I could please indulge you in a question. At one time I called into your show and we were into a discussion, and I told you about my spear in a gumball-like machine and how we are like socks. And then you said that paralleled a story that you knew of, and I have tried to find the archive of that show, and if you could, sir, off the top of your head, would you remember that?
We have a gumball full of thoughts.
Well, I explained it to you that that we as entities are like a sock, and we go to this gumball machine, and it has a bunch of spheres in it, and it gets put in the sock, and as we go through our existence, we make the spheres a certain color. And then when we release the sock, the spheres go back into the gumball machine, and then it gets filled up again. Mm-hmm. And if you happen to be a sock that has maybe 3 or 4 of the same color spheres from that past life, that you are able to remember that and recall it. And you said that this paralleled a story that you once read about, and you said the book, and I didn't have the opportunity to write it down.
Remember, it's been a few years, but I remember. The book is called Magister Ludi, L-U-D-I, and it was written by Hermann Hesse. And Hermann Hesse had a psychologist. His name was Carl Jung. Carl Jung taught him about man and his symbols. And so Hermann Hesse wrote this book called Magister Ludi, and it was about a school called Castalia. And what they would do is teach you different disciplines, and when you mastered that discipline, they would give you a glass bead. And the idea was to collect the beads, and after time, what would happen is the certain patterns of beads could be put together into another bead. And so you didn't end up with a gumball full of beads. At the end of understanding everything, you ended up with one bead from which all beads were derived.
Wow.
Nice. I do appreciate that. My second question, if I may, sir, and we can travel in time tonight on the show. At the beginning of the show, you were talking about fields and different variations or semantics of describing fields.
Hey, Nace.
And when you were talking about
Nace, we're just a few
Yes,
seconds
sir.
out of break. Can you just hold that, and we'll get right back to your call on the other side.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our last break of the night, and then we actually have another caller on the board too. So we'll get to the other call as well right after break. So don't go away, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be continuing with the Paranormal Portal.
With Tony Longbeard.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last half hour of our show. This has gone far, far, far too quickly, but the show is kind of about time anomalies, and this is a time anomaly for certain how quickly it goes. I swear to God, we just introduced Brooks just a few minutes ago, and it's already the last half hour of the show. So once again, Brooks, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
It's been our pleasure, sir. It's been all of our pleasure. We're all collectively trying to flip the burger patty between our ears because it's cooking quickly. But you're doing a phenomenal job. And of course, before break, ladies and gentlemen, we had a call from Mr. Naysay, who is going to finish his call right now. Mr. Naysay, you are back on the air, and the floor is yours, sir. Oh, I have him muted. I muted him. I muted him after that squeaky voice.
He's weird all the time. He's like over there, and you can't hear him because he's muted.
That's true. All right, Naysay, are you there? I'm sorry, I muted you.
That's okay. Thank you. So if I can, I know you got another caller, so I'm going to try to make this quick. I'm going to preface it with a metaphor where an individual is in the middle of a pond and he waves his arm, and the movement of the wave causes the surface of the water to ripple and hit towards you. So does he hit you, or the wave of the water hit, what hits you when you talk about a wave of protons coming and striking us? And if you could explain that a little bit more in theory, and then your question that you were talking about earlier, and I'd love to hear this one. If you can give me a denotation of how a magnet works, and I'll listen on the air. And thank you so much, Brooks. I enjoy you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the questions. Okay, let's see if we could do this thought experiment really. One of the things that we realize we have this I am moment in the universe. That is to say, a single consciousness in the universe really doesn't exist because there's nothing to compare it to. So it takes the square root of itself. People used to think it just divides itself in two. That's not what happens. I'm pretty sure it takes the square root of itself. And then there are two, but that is still not really enough perspective. You really have to take a square root a second time of both of those bodies. Now what you end up with is perspective. Now you have depth and movement, and you have what in physics we call a frame. And the relationship between two different intelligences or two different points of energy in the universe is what we call frame dragging. So talk about sitting in the middle of a pond, waving your arms. The arms make waves, the waves go out. This is the interaction between one energy to another energy. And this is the best thought experiment that I have about this. It's called Planck's bucket. Max Planck had a thought experiment where you're sitting in a boat, and the boat is on the water, and the water is the surface of the water in a bucket. And the bucket is hanging from a rope in a room of stars. And the bucket is wound up. That is to say, you twist the rope up until you have all this potential energy in the rope. The water's calm, the boat's calm, the stars are still around the room, and then you let the bucket go. And as the bucket drops a little bit, it begins to spin because the rope is unwinding now after you're winding it up. So if you're sitting in the boat and you look out, what do you see? Well, you see the stars going around and around and around and around and around. But what's the surface of the water doing? Well, the surface of the water is curving because of the centrifugal force of the bucket spinning around and around, right? It's the same thing happens in a drink. You spin the water and it cups, it goes up the sides. And everybody said, yeah, that's exactly what you would see if you were sitting in the boat on the water in the bucket, and the bucket was spinning. And he said, now, what if the bucket was actually still and the rope was still and it was on a swivel and you spun the room instead,
Yeah.
would the water curve? And everyone agrees, yes, the water would curve, because it is the relative difference between the two frames of energy that counts. It's perspective. And there was pretty much resounding applause because Max Planck was such a genius. But we realized that nothing is really at rest in the universe. Every single thing is moving. There is nothing still in the universe. So that's that experiment. Now, you asked me a question about measurement. Measurement is merely observation. We can measure the color of something, the length, the weight, the speed, the spin. We can measure its size, but it's the instant we make a measurement is when that thing becomes real. If it is never observed and never measured from a physics point of view, it never existed.
Wow.
I know the arguments because I've heard them, but Einstein put his pipe down one day and said, "You can't tell me that the moon exists because a mouse looked at it." It was very evangelical. But everybody else, we pretty much go off logic, and the thought experiments can get pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a profound way of re-explaining the universe. That's pretty amazing. So
Well, it works for people too. If you're in a big crowd of people and you realize you're standing still and the whole crowd of people is moving, it's the same exact thing. You can move through that crowd like a race car moving through pylons that are standing still.
Yeah, very true. All right, so we do also have a phone call.
Okay.
All right, so let's get to this next call and see what's going on. Miss Diane Swiger, you're on the air.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you, man?
Hello, Brooks.
Hi.
And how are you, Brent and Don? And hello, everybody, and hugs all around.
We are wonderful.
And especially you, Mr. Brooks. Oh, Mr. Brooks Agnew. I'm sapiosexual, and I want your number. But no, it's because I want to interview you, too. Sometime when I start to interview people, you are going to be one of them, man. But God, I'm listening to this and I'm going, yes, you are kind of a manifestation of mine. I've been saying we need people who are more like engineers coming into this field and explaining things because, I mean, like for instance, how you can't really cut monolithic stones with a copper instrument. That's kind of ridiculous. It just doesn't work. But
I'll be surprised to hear it was dental floss. They did it with dental floss.
I'm sorry. I laugh a lot. It's just my way. But yeah, I hear all of the arguments, and they just don't seem to understand how far they're reaching. We need someone like you who can say, you're really reaching here. You're actually being so unreasonable trying to fit the world into your paradigm. You can't have paradigm. Okay, well, paradigm. You say tomato, I say tomato. But anyway, it's like these people try to make it fit what they want us to think. We need people to say, it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. And you seem to me to be one of the guys that could do that. And I really want to say I appreciate that. I mean, I have this. Go ahead.
I appreciate the compliment. I can't tell you how many times I've been handed a cardboard box covered in dust, tape, and it's been handed from professor to another professor to another professor, handed to him from some company that bought a new machine and took this one apart and put it in the box with no manual, no nothing. And they just turned that together to make it work.
Yeah, it's weird. I have that thing where I can look at something and just know how it works. It's weird. But I can't put it together necessarily, but I can know how it works. Anyway, that's a talent. That's an amazing gift. I'm so impressed. And what you said about the other, and so many other things you said too. Like I have a theory. I mean, I was looking into the right frequencies and the the theory of resonance and vibration and everything. I have it, as far as I understand, if something would stop vibrating, it wouldn't exist. I mean, entirely. So, I'm sitting there and I'm going, wow, I've tried to say that in different ways to people, but you really have a way of, well, you're saying it very well. You're saying these things very well.
I appreciate it. I think, being an artist isn't really about if you have a good hand. It's about if you have a good eye. Being able to see things the way they are, and then, doing your best at stumbling through trying to describe it is a lot better than not seeing and trying to make it up. Sitting in my living room one time, and I had my guitar. My acoustic guitar was out of the case and was leaning up against the wall, and I was playing some loud music one day. All of a sudden, it seemed like somebody had reached over on that guitar, taken the pick, and just plucked a string really loud. In fact, it rang so loud, it rattled against the fretboard, if you know what that sounds like.
Yes, I do. I play guitar, too.
And I went, I realized what just happened. The string on that guitar acted like a spectrometer. What it resonated energy that was in this room at exactly that string's frequency. But that frequency was absorbed out of the room by the guitar. And if I could measure all the energy that stereo was putting out into the room, and I subtracted the amount of energy that it took to ring that string, I could tell what the absorbance of that string was from the room. And that is the basis of spectroscopy. It's also the basis for all manifestation.
Wow.
Yes, it is. I'm so thrilled to hear somebody really explain that. I am so thrilled.
I thought to myself, what if I did that on purpose? What if I said, okay, I want to resonate that in the future? Frequency do I have to put out here in the past to make it vibrate in the future and manifest into ring? Like you said, if it's not vibrating, it doesn't exist.
Exactly. That's what Rife was doing. If you play the opposite of the resonance, it flattens the wave. It disappears. It stops existing. We could change everything. According to his theory.
What's the opposite, though?
Yes.
The opposite is 90 degrees. It's not 180 degrees. It's 90 degrees. If you look at the sine wave, if you went 180 degrees, it would look exactly the same way that it does. It's
yes, it would. Yes.
Peak becomes the valley. That's called noise
cancellation. Yes. Oh, gosh. We could have some great talks. I will have to start interviewing people now just so I have an excuse to interview you. It could be quite interesting. Okay. Wow. I don't want to is anybody else trying to get through, but I don't want to tie up the phone too long, because I sometimes do. And then Brent has to cut me off. But we're still friends anyway. But
I still love you anyway. But no, there's no calls
I
waiting.
know you do. How can you help it? No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Okay. I just want to say, wow, I am definitely going to keep listening to this and replay it again. And do you have like a Facebook or a page or a
I do.
Website or a
Facebook is Brooks Agnew, Twitter is Brooks Agnew, YouTube is Brooks Agnew. My website's brooksagnew.com. Very difficult to find.
Okay, I'll I'll look until I find it.
Please.
I'll subscribe and do all that. Okay, you can count on me, and you'll be receiving a friend request, and I don't know if you'll take it or not, but you'll be receiving one. I do want to hear more, and if you're on anybody else's show, I'm sorry, Britt, but I'll have to watch that one too. So, okay, thank you so much for your brilliance. It's been awesome. Everybody out here in the chat room is gaga over you. Okay?
Thank you very much. I'm old.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, good night, Di. Thanks for calling in. And we are moving through the night. We literally have just about 10 minutes left. Now, in the show description, I did make a mention of Hollow Earth. And what I have to ask you is in relation to the cataclysmic event you're talking about where the two bodies came together, one rock, one water, how is there a possibility of there being a Hollow Earth following something like that?
Well, there are two ideas about the way planets form. One is the common one, which is space is mostly gas. And we can pretty much observe that everywhere we look. And what happens is this gas will come together in a process called accretion. It forms a giant accretion disk, which can be the size of a solar system. Of course, the smaller the space that it begins to occupy in space, the faster it rotates. And inside this accretion disk are smaller accretion disks, which become planets. Along a Fibonacci ratio from the sun going outward, they form orbits. And just about every solar system, every moon system has a planet along these resonant rings. But as these planets begin to form, they occupy smaller and smaller and smaller space. And just like an ice skater, they spin faster and faster and faster and faster as that mass becomes more dense. And that is to say, less volume, same weight. And the planet will do one of three things. It will become lopsided and it will spit a piece of itself off like a moon, like Venus spit off a piece of itself, which was Mercury, and then Mercury eventually became its own planet. It will become unstable and it will explode into a million pieces like an asteroid belt. Or it will begin to expand and cool and expand and cool and expand and cool. And we call this kind of a Goldilocks condition. But what happens is that planet becomes solid. And the realization is that all planets in space form as hollow spheres. They don't form as solid balls in space. Even Pluto, little tiny Pluto, is hollow. Sometimes they leave a core behind in the center, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes all the mass goes into the crust, and it's sort of like a thick crust ball, like an orange without a center. But if they do have a core, the core will conserve its momentum and will remain at its original rotational energy. So as the crust begins to cool and expand, it goes slower and slower and slower, like the ice skater letting her arms out and slowing to a stop. So what you end up with is a rotational differential between the core and the crust, and this generates a very powerful magnetic field. Some planets have a magnetosphere and some planets do not have a magnetosphere. Mars does not have one. Earth has one. It is this rotational differential that causes it, like a motor, like a generator. They all do it. It's a theory of electromagnetism, and it holds true. So a planet that has 1,000 or 1,200 miles of empty space inside of it has a place for water. If it collides with a water planet, water is going to be on the outside of the planet, but it's also going to be on the inside of the planet. Do we have any evidence of that? Yes, we do. We have actually scientifically measured with seismometers another ocean underneath the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh
Wave
my God.
crashed against a shore inside the planet.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yep, I've heard that.
Huh. Wow. So there could be a whole different ecosphere right beneath us. There could be an entire world.
Can tell you this as a scientist: if there is space there, I promise you there is life.
Wow. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen, right here on the portal. Brooks, we have another call that just came in, so let's get to this. We only got a few minutes left, but let's have this call. It's 386. You're on the air.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing, Naga?
What's going on, guys? I was just been in and out all night. I'm sorry. Just wanted to bother you guys just to say, hey, what's going on?
Oh, cool, cool. Did you have a question or anything that you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. No, not really. I just want to say hi.
All right, brother. Well, thanks for saying hi, and it's good to hear from you, and I hope you're doing good. And say hello to Mrs. Naga. Tell her we love her.
I will.
All right, brother. You have a good
All
night.
right, guys.
See ya. All right. So, again, then, into the hollow earth. Do you think that perhaps this is where some of the extraterrestrial intelligences, I assume that you believe that that's plausible and possible, and that we are visited by extraterrestrials. Is that correct?
Well, you used a couple of words. One's believe. I'm going to leave that one alone. But possibilities, I really like that.
Okay.
I don't know how possible it is for someone to climb into a ship of any kind and travel across space to get here. I don't know anybody that would last long enough, even a dozen millennia to get here. Mm-hmm. But I do consider the possibility that there is more than one level of intelligent life on this planet. And that maybe it doesn't interact every day, but you cannot have 7 billion witnesses on the planet, and roughly 80% of them say that they have seen something flying that they cannot explain. And people from all walks of life. But one thing we do know for sure, these flying objects are as present as they want to be. Mm-hmm. And the idea that there is more than one ecospace on this planet is very acceptable to me. That maybe at the bottom of the sea or in other environments, there are other life forms that occupy this planet that cannot or will not live on the surface with us. Mm-hmm. Okay with that too.
Outstanding. Well, Brooks, we're about down to just a couple minutes left. Please take this time to let people know how to keep in touch with you and to follow what you're doing.
Well, as you mentioned earlier in the program, I am also a TFR host, X Squared Radio, every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on TFR. I'm also on Quantum Connections Mondays and Wednesday nights with Lucky One. And then you can always go to xsquaredradio.com or brooksagnew.com and learn about the books, lectures, things like that I've put out. And I would appreciate any contact that you have. We're all in the business to try to get our ideas out there, and I'm doing the same thing. And Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, Google is all Brooks Agnew. Easy to do.
You can find him anywhere, ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully you do, because I'm just absolutely overwhelmed, but in a good way. I mean, I really, really enjoyed this show, and I've really enjoyed your input and your vision. It's just phenomenal, and I also enjoy your delivery, because as intelligent and as knowledgeable as you are, you're not overwhelming with it. Like, you're not just bowling people over. You have this natural ability to teach. And so I thank you for that. And thank you for sharing it with us here on the portal.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, anytime. And in fact, anytime you want to come back, just let me know.
Just knock on the door.
You just scratch on the window like a kitten. I'll let you in. I promise. It's just it's been amazing. But ladies and gentlemen, definitely check out Brooks's work. And again, he's He's a Amazon best-selling author. He's got a few book series out there, but his newest one is called Charm of Favor. It's the story of the Clinton crime syndicate, and it's just phenomenal. I've not had a chance to read it yet, but I'm just absolutely thrilled to have it. I do have a copy of it, and I plan on doing that. Please go out there, support his work. The man is a tireless machine of contribution to society. So definitely check it out, and please like and subscribe the video if you're on YouTube, and stick around here on TFR, iHeart, tune in and TalkStream for Jimmy G and Into the Microcosm coming up next, ladies and gentlemen. So love you all, be nice, be kind, and we'll see you soon. See you Wednesday night for the Paranormal Portal.